BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. And yes, today we are getting back into our discussions on Thomas Henry Horan and the Great Zodiac Killer Hoax of 1986. As you see here, this is not part one, this is listed as part six, but the thing is, though, this is just a discussion about the Zodiac Killer and a very large alternative theory out there. So if you haven't heard any of the previous parts, feel free to keep listening. And this is probably going to be a pretty short upload. And in the early segments, we were reading from the book and we're kind of challenging some statements. We're talking about the points that Thomas Horan makes that we agree with and some of the points that we're taking exception with. We're not going to be using the book today because we're just going to look at a few things that are going on. First and foremost, I would say that Thomas Henry Horan supports something that's called the group murder theory. That's just what I call it. I haven't really heard anyone else identifying that with that particular name. And it pretty much goes that there were multiple people involved with the Zodiac murders, like the murders of Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, and then, of course, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Ann Shepard, and Paul Stine. That you have multiple killers as opposed to only a single killer. Now, the first thing I would say about this is, I would approach it from this particular angle. If you would ever, I don't think I've been completely clear during the uploads about my stance on Thomas Henry Horan. Do I support his theory or do I reject it? And there's a very good reason for that. It's neither of the two. On this channel, I mean, I rarely hold back anything that I genuinely want to say, and that's all I can really say about Thomas Henry Horan and the Great Zodiac Killer Hoaxes. I just want to know more. I can't tell you who the Zodiac Killer is. I really wish that I could. But I would make a very bold claim right now and say that none of the major suspects feel super convincing to me. Lawrence Kane is getting pretty close, right? But it was my own original observation about why we started talking about this whole group murder thing, because I was like, it just feels like we're dealing with the psychology of multiple people. All of these weird inconsistencies in the Zodiac case. But here, though, we have an interesting comment that came in on one of our Zodiac uploads from the YouTube user Matthew, what's his name? Yes, that's his YouTube name here. And let's just read off his comment. I don't think there's any merit to the group murder theory. Sharon Hagen's behavioral profile of the Zodiac from the 2008 documentary is, I believe, very accurate. You can find that video on YouTube where she talks about the significance of the Zodiac's crimes taking place on weekends and holidays, which suggests that he had steady employment. She also notes his increasing confidence with each crime. After the first murder in December, he doesn't kill again for 6 months. Then, after getting away with the murder on July 4th, it only takes him 2 months to kill again. In September, and then only 2 weeks after the September murder to commit the Paul Stine murder in October. After nearly getting caught, the murders stop and he puts all the energy into the letters. That's why I don't think any of the crimes prior to December of 1968 or October of 1969 can be attributed to the Zodiac Killer. He likely got away with the four aforementioned murders and went back to his prior life. First of all, thank you to Matthew for the comment. Very good one. And just to give one moment of clarity, when he says prior to 1968 or after 1969, I mean, that would be excluding Sherry Jo Bates and excluding Kathleen Johns. Yes, we've talked about Sharon Hagen on this channel before and the videos that he's mentioned, but that was a very long time ago. And she made some very insightful comments, I would say, about how she did not believe that Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac Killer because Arthur Lee Allen was known to be a sexual predator. And if you even look up stuff about Arthur Lee Allen, it says that he's, a pedophile, right? So the Zodiac was not a sexual predator. She also says that it is most likely the Zodiac Killer did not commit Sherry Jo Bates' murder because the Bates murder was very vicious. It was like a brutal attack. Sherry Jo is pulling out the killer's hair, and she was slashed across the face and the neck. Those type of details are not found in any of the Zodiac murders. They are not vicious and brutal. I often use the word flawless to describe Lake Herman Road and Lake Berryessa. Someone comes up, they commit the murder, they fire a few bullets, and then they walk away. The Paul Stine murder as well, a few bullets are fired, and then the person walks away. The thing that I disagreed with Sharon Hagen was very clearly was that she said the Zodiac Killer was not sadistic. I thought the Zodiac Killer was very sadistic at Lake Berryessa tying up the victims, taunting them, and stabbing them multiple times, not just once or anything, stabbing Cecilia Shepard 10 times. So, what do we make of this here? Well, I mean, I told you from the beginning, I can't tell you who the Zodiac Killer is, but what I would say, though, is that when we're going to be looking at Thomas Horan's theory, that there are multiple murders committed by multiple different people, I say that this is kind of a big wrench that has been thrown into the stuff. Have you ever just looked at the Zodiac timeline, and have you noticed that perhaps Lake not Herman Road. Lake Herman Road happened on December 20th of 1968. And did you ever get that feeling? Why is that so close to Christmas? And I believe what Matthew via Sharon Hagen is trying to say is that it's like that murder happened near Christmas, and Blue Rock Springs happened on July 4th. Darlene Ferrin was pronounced dead on July 5th. These are around holidays. These are around times when people were probably off of work, or people were on some sort of perhaps Christmas vacation, off for the 4th of July, something like that. These are the actions of a working professional. And I mean, we've mentioned the observation that was made by somebody in the past, how the zodiac activity slowly gets closer together. There's about 7 months in between Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs, and the explanation that is left in this comment here is that the Zodiac was a person who was gaining confidence, not as what Thomas Horan says. We haven't mentioned the Paul Stein murder yet in the Thomas Horan book, but his explanation for that, now if memory serves correctly, is that after Lake Berryessa on September 27th of 1969, people started becoming rather suspicious, and they needed to do something to create a distraction. They needed to do something to get all the attention away from any possibility that Lake Berryessa could be anything other than the Zodiac, or that they needed to keep the Zodiac thing going. They needed to kind of fan the flames a little. That's why they took credit for the Paul Stein murder, and that's why that I believe it's Robert Graysmith. They even ripped off a piece of Paul Stein's shirt in the evidence and then mailed it in, and then they can be like, okay, this guy confessed to the Paul Stein murder, and we also have him, I mean, very visibly, you have somebody in the Zodiac hood with the Zodiac symbol at Lake Berryessa. I believe that I had a comment come in recently on a different upload where someone, I think it might have even been part 1 of our discussions about Thomas Henry Horan, where somebody said that they thought Lake Berryessa was a copycat, where that's the only time you have the Zodiac Killer in the hood. That's the only time that you have the Zodiac Killer stabbing people. I mean, all the other murders, Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, and the Paul Stein murder, were committed with gunshots. This is why I mentioned that there are an enormous amount of inconsistencies in the Zodiac activity, and there really appears to be no consistent pattern of time in the activity. And what the explanation we do have here, though, is that they're saying that gaining confidence, whereas Thomas Horan says that there are a series of unconnected murders that happened, and then they created this kind of boogeyman in the dark known as the Zodiac Killer to link it all together and to kind of deceive the public. And Robert Graysmith was working on his Zodiac book as early as 1972, but he was involved with a lot of the activities around making the myth of the Zodiac. So says Thomas Horan. I mean, I think he provides a very interesting and well-composed theory. And, like, I mean, one guy was very critical of me for talking about Thomas Horan, and I mentioned that in part 1, and I was like, whoa, I don't think that he's wrong about everything. Like I said, I think he is very articulate on the subject. But if we're going to say what we genuinely believe, I do take an enormous amount of the exceptions of some of the claims that he's making about Lake Herman Road, saying teenagers would never use this as a lover's lane. I don't know. It seems like, after looking at the stuff, it seems like they could very well have used that as a lover's lane and such. I mean, the reasons why he provides why that wouldn't be the case, I didn't really find it very convincing. Not saying he's wrong, saying that I was just simply not convinced. And you also have to remember, in 1968 and 69 and 70, people all thought that these murders were committed by one person. It was a very widely held belief that there was one person committing these murders. We have the newspaper articles. We have the 1971 film that depicts the Zodiac Killer going about this in a particular way. I think it's a very thoughtful thing that somebody left when they said that Lake Berryessa could have been a copycat because that's why the Zodiac is wearing the hood and that's why the Zodiac chose to stab the victims instead of shoot them. But you could also view that as Michael Mageau survived Blue Rock Springs on the 4th of July and he saw the Zodiac without a hood on, so clearly the Zodiac could have wanted to protect his identity and then he went out with the hood just simply in case one of the victims survived, which Brian Hartnell did survive, Lake Berryessa. We went out with the hood simply to protect his identity, being more cautious, and that wouldn't even reject the comment from Matthew what's his name that we read off here. But it's like, I mean, maybe we can do a larger upload in the future on Sharon Hagen. I think she gives excellent breakdowns. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything. I told you I didn't agree with the things about saying the Zodiac wasn't a sadistic killer. I disagreed with that, but I still just like the way she presents it. I like the way she breaks things down. Another person that I really recommended was Dr. Julie Armstrong. I noticed she doesn't have too many things on YouTube, but if you look at our upload on the case of Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, the Boneyard Killers, I mean, we talk a lot about Dr. Julie Armstrong and her comments about serial killers. If you're into the case of Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, we have that here on this channel. So, is there any... what do we do with group murder theory or one person? I mean, like, was the Zodiac Killer one person, or was there a series of murders that happened and that people tried to link them together through this identity of the Zodiac? In short, saying that the Zodiac Killer is kind of just... a moniker, it is just a name, but in these things are actually being committed by multiple people. I think we're just going to have to keep exploring. But, I mean, if you could really find out and find some way to prove that all of these murders were committed by one single person, then Thomas Horan's theory would be completely rejected, this Great Zodiac Killer Hoax of 1986. I mean, all of his claims would be pretty much rejected. But other than the fact that he says that Graysmith is a habitual liar, I don't really think too highly of Robert Graysmith to begin with, so no harm there. No harm done, right? Okay, but I would just like to ask you guys your kind of thoughts and feelings about everything that we've mentioned so far. And actually, I'll ask a bigger question, because I've never really asked it in this very specific way. Why do you believe that Lake Berryessa has so many differences between that killing and the other Zodiac murders? You have the perpetrator wearing the hood, perpetrator stabbing the victims, long drawn out conversations talking about Deer Lodge Prison in Montana. We did the transcript reading for the 50th anniversary of Lake Berryessa. All of these things seem quite different. I can tell you one thing. We might not necessarily know the words that were exchanged on Lake Herman Road, or if anything else happened a little bit differently, because there's might be some missing information. But with Lake Berryessa, why do you think there are so many differences in that particular killing? Please leave any comments you have below, and I think next time we'll get back to reading from the book. But thank you for listening to this upload on the Zodiac Killer. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button, and if you have anything to contribute, I want to hear your comments below. Until next time.